Hello and welcome to today's training, which is Payroll Finalizations. My name is Jodi and I am here to show you how to get your payroll done correctly the first time so that you don't have questions from your employees and you don't feel like you're fumbling through. So if you are live on the call with me today, I'd love to know where you're calling from. I am in sunny Perth, which is just sunny right now, in WA, and it is freezing. So if you'd like to put in the chat whereabouts you're calling from. Today we've got a very special class where I'm going to run through about 20 minutes worth of slides on what sort of steps you need to run so that you can finish your payroll with ease this year. And then we're going to have a question and answer system. So if you want to type your questions in the chat as we're going through, then I'm happy to address those questions after I've done the main presentation. And if you do have any questions, I have the ability to bring you on the screen as well, if that's what you choose to do, or just do your voice. So if you do have any questions, either write them in the chat as I'm going through the presentation or hold them till I've finished the presentation. Awesome, so I'm going to get started. Now today we're going to run through all of the steps for you to make sure your payroll is done correctly and on time. So before you get started, what you need to do while you're doing the processing and then what you can do to finish it off. So let's have a look at this. So first of all, we're going to look at the reports that we need to check to make sure that our payroll is run correctly. Then we're going to see what it is that we need to compare, and then before you submit the button to lodge with the tax office, what is it that you need to do? So who am I and why am I here? My name is Jodi and I am one of the owners of Northwest Accountancy, and I show up as the chief educator. So I'm here today to educate you on how to report your payroll properly. So we are sitting down in the relevant reporting section today. Now at the end of this call, I'm also going to tell you about elevation training. So in elevation training, we touch on all four areas. So relevant reporting, timely taxes, cash flow clarity, and strong structure. And if you stay around to the end, there'll be a little QR code or a clip-on code that will help you get a 50% discount for 6 months to join elevation training if that's of interest to you. Now, elevation training has two components, and I'll talk about those later, but one of the components is the meetups, in which I do a little quick presentation similar today, and then we do a Q&A session similar today. So if you enjoy what you see today, then you can join in every week and get a little bit of training and a lot of Q&A directed for your business. Okie dokie, so let's talk payroll because that's why we're here. It's that time of year. 30th of June is the end of financial year, and so we want to make sure that all of your payroll is up to date and finished before you submit to the tax office. So the first most important thing is to make sure that your bank accounts have been reconciled. So by reconciled, I mean they're matched and everything that's in your bank accounts has been allocated in your accounting software. So we support both MyOb and Xero. So if you use MyOb and Xero, then I'll have links for those down the bottom as well. But if your bank accounts aren't reconciled, then we could be missing key transactions that may affect payroll. So it's really important to make sure all of your bank accounts are reconciled first. Then with both MyOb and Xero, they have a payroll clearing account. So is your payroll clearing account zero? Does it have a nil balance? In which case, when you're looking at your balance sheet, can you not see that clearing account on the balance sheet? If it shows on your balance sheet, and this is in Xero, your wages payable payroll account, and in MyOb, it's your payroll clearing account. If they are showing on your balance sheet as of the 30th of June or as of today, then that means it's not clear and you need to figure out why, and you need to rectify that before you go and process your payroll. Then make sure all the pays have been paid. If you've got payroll to do tomorrow, don't process your STP finalisation today because you'll be missing key data. So our end of financial year finishes on Sunday, the 30th of June. So if you've got payroll to do before the 30th of June, make sure it's done before you process your payroll. Once we kick over into July and you've done all of the pays, then you're good to process payroll finalizations. Now, as a part of either the bank accounts being cleared or the clearing accounts being cleared, but also just another, do you owe any money to anybody for payroll, and does that need to be processed? So do you need to physically put a payroll through the payroll system, or do you just owe the physical cash? So making sure that that's all in play and you don't owe anybody any money, and it's all cleared up before the 30th of June makes it really easy to reconcile and make sure that your balance is correct. So like I said, Xero and MyOb, both of them have really, really good help systems in their websites. So just Google single touch payroll data or single touch payroll Xero or single touch payroll MyOb, and in both programs there are the links in there as well to help you built into the program to help you make sure you get everything done right. So this is not how I use Xero to do my payroll. This is what things you need to check. So let's move on. So let's think about some of the basics of what we need to consider before we do STP. So first of all is the STP pay runs have been filed under the system. So we've had the STP system in play for a few years now. So it's all about making sure that our pay runs are filed with the tax office. So every week or every fortnight when you're running payroll, the year-to-date figures are lodged with the tax office. And if there's ever been any adjustments or fixes to the errors that you might have made, then those year-to-date figures are updated with the tax office. So essentially we're going to compare the end of year payroll amounts in your system with what's been reported to the tax office and make sure that they're okay. The next part is making sure our leave balances are reasonable. So I do have a slide on this later on, but the slides are, it's not mandatory to look at leave while we're doing payroll, but while we're in here, we can then look at look at leave balances and make sure they're reasonable, and make sure that if there does seem to be anything wrong, that we pick it up now and get it resolved before we come back to it in another year. Or if the employee wants to leave, we don't have to do additional calculations. We're pretty happy with where that's at. So I'll talk about that one in a little bit later. The next one is your terminated staff. So I did a session with a client the other day on finishing off payroll for this year, and one of the things they hadn't done was put their terminated staff in with a termination date. So with MyOb, it's a two-factor approach. You have to do a final pay, and in Xero you do a final pay as well, just to finalise them off. You need to put their end date in against their employee card. But then also in MyOb, there's a termination date section that you need to go through and put a termination date in. So what's on their card doesn't actually link to what's in on their pay information. So you actually do have to do that nomination of a termination date and why they were terminated. So that's all part of STP2. Then checking that all of your staff have their superannuation details entered. Now, if you are using the automatic super out of Xero or out of MyOb, then all of your super details will be correct. So that's all good. But if you are using the small business clearinghouse, just double checking that all your super fund details are correct for each employee. And then finally, nothing to do with payroll finalization, but do you have a contract for each employee, or do you know which award you're paying them under? Now, with awards, there is going to be a change to the award rates coming on the 1st of July, so be aware that that is going to happen, and your award rates are coming into effect for the first full pay period after the 1st of July. So if you're paying on a weekly basis and you pay on Wednesdays, then the first Wednesday includes some of June, so it wouldn't have the updated award rate, but the following Wednesday would be only July pay, so it will actually pick up the new award rates. So just be aware of when the timing of those award rates change for your business, for your pay dates. Next, reporting. So we do all the basic checks and now we do the system checks. So what reports do we need to run to make sure that payroll is correct? So the first one is the balance sheet report. So running a balance sheet report is that snapshot in time. So on that balance sheet, you'll be able to see your bank account balances and make sure they match with what your bank statement says. You'll also be able to see whether you've got that payroll clearing account on there as well. So if you do have a payroll clearing account, it needs to be fixed. And then you'll be able to see any balances for superannuation, any balances for pay-as-you-go withholding. So both of those will show on your payroll reports as well. Then we look at your payroll summary report. So depending on whether you're MyOb or your Xero user, they have slightly different names. So payroll activity summary report in MyOb or payroll activity summary in Xero. So similar, but slightly different. The payroll employee summary report in Xero has a list of employees and then their gross, tax and net amounts as well as super. And that's the place where I start with the reports, and then I can run other reports to review as well. Then we've got your profit and loss report. What you're checking on your profit and loss report is that your total of your wages on your profit and loss report matches your payroll summary reports. So if you have a nice simple payroll system, that you're not paying any salary sacrifice, you're not making any deductions for employees, you don't pay allowances, then your gross pay on your payroll summary report will match with your wages on your profit and loss report. And the same with superannuation. Your superannuation on your payroll summary report will match with your profit and loss total report for the year. So it's really important that you've got an understanding that payroll interacts with both the balance sheet and the profit and loss report. Balance sheet shows what you owe at a particular point in time. So if you're paying superannuation on a quarterly basis, it'll show superannuation total for April to June. If you pay your pay-as-you-go withholding on a monthly basis, then it'll show on your balance sheet pay-as-you-go withholding for the month of June. So checking that your payroll summary reports match your balance sheet, your payroll summary reports match your profit and loss for different time frames is really important as well. Once you've done all of those checks, then you can move on. Moving on, we look at our BAS, so our business activity statement. What have you lodged for the year versus what's on the payroll summary reports? Now, this year, the tax office started bringing through the data from your STP reports into the BAS automatically. So if you've been relying on those numbers, double checking that what's on the BAS for the total of the year matches what the payroll summary reports are for the year. So doing that double check to make sure that the tax office has pulled the correct information is really important, because just because you've reported it doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean that the ATO has picked up the correct number. So we want to do those double checks as well. And you may not have lodged your June BAS yet, but this is a great time that if there are changes to make, you can do those changes on the June BAS if applicable. So when we collect all of these reports and generate them out of our bookkeeping software, then we put them all into one document. So I like to create one Excel spreadsheet and call it 2024 Payroll Finalisation. And that way I can do a search at a later stage and look for the word payroll, look for the word 2024 payroll, and it should come up for me if I need to go back and look at those documents later on. The other thing is, if you want to save them all as separate documents, as PDF documents or whatever, have a folder in your document filing system somewhere, electronic hopefully, and call that 2024 payroll. And that way you can save all of the reports into the same one spot, and then they're easily findable later on if you need them. What else are we checking and comparing? Well, we're making sure that our gross wages match across all the reports. We're making sure our pay-as-you-go withholding matches across all of the reports. We're making sure that any discrepancy amounts are showing as correct. And what I mean by discrepancy amounts is looking for those things that aren't gross wages, but we have paid them. So we've physically paid an allowance, for example, a motor vehicle allowance. it will show as gross in our payroll reports, but it won't show as gross on our payment summaries and our income statements. So knowing the difference of where each of those pay items that you've paid need to be reported is really important. I don't have time to run through that right now, but if you do have questions, put them in the chat. And then fix those discrepancy amounts before we submit to the tax office. So there's been times over the years where where a customer of ours or a client has gone ahead and processed their finalization, but not done all the checks and balances, and they've come back to us a few days later and gone, hey, somebody's asking us why this doesn't match. So then we've had to go through and do all the checks and balances later, and it costs more and it's more time precious because they're ready to get their tax done, for example. So we want to make sure that everything we're checking and correcting before we submit it to the tax office. So one of the things that we do is we can identify and help you work out what those issues are if you wanted that as a service from Northwest Accountancy. So as I said before at the top of the call, leave balances are something that we're not going to impact on the STP finalization, but it is a good thing to check while you're here. So making sure that the calculations are working for your business so that when you go to pay somebody out when they leave, you've got that not certainty, but you understand that that is a reasonable amount based on their history. So for most staff, they're eligible for 4 weeks of leave every year, and if they work a 38-hour week, this is 152 hours per year that they get added to their annual leave balance. And then every time they take leave, it's reduced by the number of holidays they take. So somebody who's been working for you for a whole year as a full-time employee, they'll have 152 hours per year. If they've taken 2 weeks of annual leave, then that 76 hours will come off and they'll generally have about 76 hours left over. So doing that quick little conversation of calculations of, is this correct for this person based on what I know, that can help to identify any errors. So things that you might want to look for is if they've only been working for you for a year, but they've got more than 152 hours of leave owing to them. And maybe that's true. Maybe they do a longer standard work week or something like that, that you do give them extra holidays for, but making sure that it looks reasonable. Or a minus balance if they've never been on leave before, or no balance at all if they're a full-time or a part-time employee. It's important to note that casual employees don't get leave. So if they are casual, then you won't be looking at leave for this person. And so just looking for those odd balances that don't fit with the activities of the staff member is really important. Okie dokie, so now you can file your STP. So if you've done all of your checks and all of your balances and your reconciliations are done and all your clearing accounts are clear and your numbers all match up, then you can file your STP. So what's included? So with Xero and MyOb, they've got a very regimented process you can follow. So just follow the prompts, it's not hard. Make sure you're checking all the lodgement details. So the business details, if you've changed address, that the year is 23-24, so we're in that 23-24 year, make sure that all of the staff are included. So if somebody has left, make sure they're still included in those STP data as well. If your business has reportable fringe benefits, then an RFBA amount will be provided either by your accountant or your salary packaging firm to put into the payroll. And I found that with MyOb, every time you jump in and out of that screen, you have to re-enter the data. So once you've done all your checks and balances, then add the RFBA amounts. And MyOb will throw up an error if it's a too low amount. So if it's under 3,773, you don't need to enter that in to an employee because it's under the threshold. So that's a good one to remember. Just threw up an error the other day, so I thought I'd mention it here. Okie dokie. So part of finalization will be getting that verification report. And your payroll system will have a verification report to show what's being lodged as the final numbers. And this is something to also save into that folder or that document to prove that you've done all of your checks and balances. So this is what you're checking the employee numbers against now. So with MyOb, you'll click on the verification report button. In Xero, you'll click on the export button. Unfortunately, they haven't renamed that yet. And check those with the reports you've already run. So if it's wrong, what happens? Well, correct any pays or irregularities and then lodge an update. So there's a payroll lodge update button that you can press once you've fixed any pay runs. You do have until the 14th of July to complete the payroll finalization process. So it's a good chance now, even if you haven't done that final pay for June, to do all the checks and balances and make sure that any pay runs can be corrected in time so that you can still lodge and finalize before the 14th of July. For some staff, you may have to file a nil wages run. Now, this was popular back in STP1, not so much for STP2. The couple of clients that I've dealt with already, their numbers have been fine, but every now and then you may need to do a nil wages, just be aware. Note that some of those things that you pay people don't necessarily show as gross wages. So it will show in as gross in your pay runs and your payroll reports, but it will show as an allowance in your verification report. So just be aware that when we add the allowances and the gross pay together from the verification report, that should match the gross wages on your payroll reports. Salary packaging also will reduce gross wages. That's not reported anywhere on the verification report, so be aware of that total if anybody in your organisation has salary packaging. And then press the button. So file that STP, press the submit, then make sure you come back and check that it's been accepted. So it can take up to 3 days depending on whenabouts you press that button. It can take a while for the tax office to accept the data. So in Xero, it's very clear whether it's an red, orange or green. So if it's green, it's been accepted and then you don't need to do anything else. But just double check that it has been accepted. So there has been times where we've helped clients to submit their file and it hasn't been accepted, and then 3-6 months later, the tax office has come back saying, hey, you haven't submitted yet. So always double check that it has been submitted. And please note that if we help you with your checks and balances, we can't be the one who presses the button for the STP finalization. So the person who runs pay runs and puts their little signature in digitally to submit the data to the tax office, we can't do that for you because we're not registered. So you'll still be the one who does that final check and balance. And then finally, let your employees know that their income details have been submitted to the tax office. So they'll be waiting for this so that they can access it from their MyGov and do their tax return by themselves, or they can get that information from their tax agent and their tax agent can help them lodge their tax return. So as soon as you've submitted, it will become tax ready in their pre-fill reports, and then we'll be able to help them do their tax returns. So what's coming up new with payroll? So we've got superannuation increasing from the 1st of July. So currently it's 11%. Next month it will be 11.5%. I believe all of the software does this automatically, but it's a good chance to double check. And then from the 1st of July 2026, you will be required to pay your employees super at the same time as salary and wages. So this is not for 2 more years. But it's really important to get into that habit now of thinking about how am I going to afford to pay super at the same time as we pay salary and wage. So a lot of business owners think about how much net pay they need. How much do I need to pay the employee today? But soon it will be, I need to pay their net pay plus their superannuation. So please be aware that this is coming up and make changes to your cash flow system if that's what you need to do to get that ready for you. This is going to be a big thing for employers on the 1st of July 26. And then, as I mentioned before, if you are working from awards, make sure your awards are updated for the correct pay rates from the 1st of July, from the first full pay date. Okie dokie. So that was my very quick 20 minutes. I think I did it in 22, so I'm doing well. So if you do have any questions, please stick in the chat those questions, or if you would like to come on and have a chat, I can make you a presenter and we can go from there. So just stick your question in the chat. So I'll be quiet. So this empty space is brought to you by Elevation Training. So what we do in Elevation Training is have a weekly meetup, and in the weekly meetup, I'll do a very quick training session, generally not with a slideshow like I've done today, but we'll do a very quick training session, and it can be one of any topic. So I generally make it relevant to what's happening in your business at this time of year. So coming up in July and August, we talk about tax and we talk about cash flow. So we'll be doing lots of little training sessions on tax, little training sessions on cash flow, and making sure that you're set up for your business so that you can do everything that you need to. So last week's training session was this training session. So we talked about payroll finalizations. And then after the presentation that I did, we then came offline. So we stopped recording and we then talk about whatever the people on the call need to move their business forward. So in this week's call, we did STP questions and looked through how you can make sure that you pick up everything and some of the reports that you ran. We also talked about how to my memory's just gone. We also talked about how to set up your business to remember and systemize so that you can do the things that take a lot of time. So in this particular case, we had a sole trader who wanted to do a superannuation payment. She said, oh, it took a little bit of time because I had to go here and I had to log in there and I had to know this, and now what form do I need to fill out? So we pointed her in the right direction of where that form was, and then said, hey, put it in your calendar for May next year with all the links that you need. So the payment details that you need, the form that you need to fill out, all of those sorts of things, so that this time next year, or even earlier the next year, you've got it set up in your calendar so that you can go straight in and do the work. So that's just an example of one of the things that we talk about in Elevation Training. Each session is for an hour and we talk about all sorts of things. We talk about tax and we talk about reporting and running reports. We do tax calculations on the call. We talk about systemizing. We talk about cash flow. So particularly we talk about profit first and how you can use bank accounts to separate your money so you know where your business is at. So that's Elevation Training. There's been no questions from the participants on the call, so I'm going to say that very awesome. Thanks, Chris. So I'm just going to do a quick little run through then of the rest of what Elevation Training looks like. So we do talk about cash flow, taxes, structure, and reporting. And we can talk about anything and everything in the call. So I have a breadth of knowledge. I've been in business for 24 years. So really I like to share everything that I can, being very succinct and try and stop the jargon. So trying to make it easy for you to understand. So we've got two parts of Elevation Training. So the community is where we show up and have the weekly meetings and you can ask questions. But the library is a resource of your own that you can access. And in that library, you can look at, watch or listen to any of the videos that I have trained from training previously. So every week when I do the little mini training, there's those recordings go into the library, as well as any bigger trainings that I do for other clients as well. So if there's anything relevant that I think everybody would like to know, in any of the areas around tax, reporting, cash flow, or systemizing your business, then they show up in the library as well. And all of the workbooks that I do as well. So I host a lot of training for chambers of commerce and for not-for-profits that might be of use. So those training workbooks are in the Elevation Training Library as well. So if you're interested in joining Elevation Training, then I do have a QR code on the screen there, and that is, it will take you straight to the login for the 6 months of payroll. And now I'm just checking it with my own phone and making sure that that works, because nothing like checking it last minute. So normally it's $297 a month. So you'll have to manually enter the coupon code for this one. So you manually enter 6 payroll 50, and then press the apply button, and that will give you 50% off for 6 months. Now you do have a 14-day trial as well, so you won't be charged for 2 weeks. So you can come in, you can join a couple of meetings, see whether it's right for you, and cancel if you need to as well. And that's absolutely fine. So if you are interested, thank you so much for joining me today. If you do have any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, thanks for joining me. And if you have any questions or any feedback from today's session, then I would love to hear that. So you can email me direct, Jodi@nwapilbara.com.au, and I will see you online at another time.